And in this day and age, you know, we live in a post-pandemic world. Uh,
It-
a lot of companies have gone back to the office. The return to office policies are in place, but for us, there are a lot of people still in this world where, they're still working remotely. So interested to hear your point of view is like you did all this innovation stuff. You've changed the culture of the organization all in a remote world. Wanted to get your thoughts because you've done it in both.
Mhm.
To get your thoughts and what's the difference of doing it in a normal office environment versus doing it in a remote environment? What did you have to change? Um, how did you have to kind of rethink things a little bit?
Working in normal office, it was actually harder. I've worked remote and semi in the office, 3 days a week, kind of hybrid setups.
Mhm.
The remote gives me more opportunity, more possibilities because of the scheduling. My biggest challenge was finding scheduling time in the office. I found it more creative. That's why I always do things at lunch, because I would do a 30-minute lunch and learn session about a technology topic where we would watch a video together. But
Yeah,
a lot of times it was, since it was a smaller team, it would be people gathered around my desk just watching it.
yeah,
Or we'd pick a meeting room and I'd go put it on there. When we all have our own desks in one place and we're not having to shuffle to meeting rooms and doing the shuffle to where the equipment isn't working and things like that, it's a lot easier. I also can schedule things back to back and set them up in there. I found when I was in the office setting, to build rapport with people, I used to play, there's a little game called Munchkin. It's a D&D game.
okay,
I would do a 30-minute Munchkin run at United Technologies, working with people there.
okay,
I completely stole that idea from one of my leaders there and loved it. Like, because they would do a Munchkin. It wasn't a super serious session,
uh-huh,
but it was a way to connect with people. And the technology conversations we would have while playing that game was amazing because you could talk about relevant topics. Back then, it was semantic versioning and webhooks and HTML5. Those were the big topics of the day.
yeah,
But we had numerous discussions about them. Pipeline builds. That's where I learned to build my first pipelines. Was over Munchkin. We had Team City. Team City pipelines back then that we were building for United Technologies. So I learned from the DevOps engineers back before DevOps was a term how to build while playing Munchkin. We were just talked about it. It was conversations we had. Some of my best topics, we would go to the gym after work and it would just be kind of discussions while we're working out about technology from like-minded individuals and things like that.
yeah,
A lot of that hit, in that point in my age where it was, because we were on site, we had to be creative about how we talked about things and had innovation.
yeah,
It wasn't quite as easy as Slack because when I got up and walked to someone's desk, I distracted them. Today, where we have Slack, I can wait 30 seconds and read that Slack at my own leisure. I'm
yeah,
not immediately turning around in my cube to get distracted and stop what I'm doing to focus a conversation with someone.
yeah,
So the asynchronous nature of remote communication
yeah,
makes life a lot easier. It's much harder. The other week when we were in the office, for our work session, I noticed I ran out of room on a whiteboard. I haven't had that problem in quite a while.
yeah,
Euro boards and Lucid, I don't run out of room. It's infinite space. I just
yeah,
present the screen, I drag wherever I need to go around on the screen. So
yeah.
I actually find it much harder getting things done in an office setting because of the physical nature of it.
The
Right?
physical limitations,
Yes, there's
all that
physical
stuff.
limitations.
Yeah,
I actually have to go to the next meeting. I actually have to walk
yeah,
down the hallway, catch an elevator, go to the next floor, go wherever to get to a meeting room.
yeah,
I have to configure the equipment and set it up in the meeting room because it's very seldom left in a good shape for the next person. That kind of thing. Half the time it doesn't work. The camera doesn't work. The
yeah.
consistency I get from the home office is far better than the inconsistency that I get from corporate offices.
And the interesting thing I'm hearing from you is, I mean, the proof is in the pudding, the data is there. I've seen you do this, and I've done it myself. But it, I bet you, like most people, hearing you say this probably feels like, oh my God, he's just being contrarian here. But it's not. It's not. It really, you are so much more effective. I mean, just simply to your point, it's easier to click on a Slack huddle to get someone's attention than it is to go walk down whatever hallway it is to find somebody
Yeah.
and try to have to find a meeting room that's available for them, for us to talk
A
through.
breakout room or a little corner session. Yeah,
Yeah.
the physical challenges of building is the problem. You know,
Yeah.
it's that kind of do it. When you take those physical dimensions out, I grew up on the internet. I grew up learning programming in a remote setting
Yeah.
using BDS games from a guy named Scott Martins, who ended up going and being the head of Sony Denver.
Yeah.
I learned in a remote setting how to handle basic logic and programming in a three-dimensional. It's not truly. It's a two-dimensional text-based world representing a three-dimensional object-oriented space.
Yeah.
You know, and that was I learned object-oriented programming by programming objects in that space. So it made sense to me. When I wrote, you know, my first script I ever wrote was a fishing script, right?
Yeah.
It was literally the players would pick up a fishing rod, have a worm item and bait it on there, and they would do an RNG and cast it. They had to be near, you know, an area of water, and you do all these checks. But that was object-oriented programming, to where I was programming the properties of objects, but these were objects also that existed in the game world. So it made like that connection, that learning really clicked with me. That's why it wasn't a challenge. So I honestly, I started in a remote world. So I think maybe that helped a little bit. It just felt natural to me in the way I grew up. I didn't grow up in a very physical world like most people, because I was isolated.
I can kind of understand where you're coming from. I mean, I will say that I probably didn't have as easy as a time of you adapting, but I certainly, going remote during the pandemic wasn't as hard for me that most people are saying. You know, there's a lot of things like I hear from, you know, my friends, and they're like, oh, I don't know how to, you know, keep an eye on what my, you know, teams are doing. And I'm just like, that's not.
You don't keep an eye on what they're doing. You keep an eye on their output. Are they producing? I don't care what they're doing as long as they're producing. That's
exactly.
The difference.
Yeah.
You're like, you know, think about what you do at the desk. How often when you're in the office do you goof off? How often are you just talking to people? Just because you're having, that's natural. Yeah. So you're killing probably 30% of your day in just conversations alone in natural social behavior.
Yeah, and not to mention the commute back and forth and the work you do to get to that, right? So it's just, you know, it's just one of those things where, you know, I agree with you. It's just a little bit, you know, easier to manage through all of that.